Mr. President, this coming week will mark Veterans Day. It's an important time for us to reflect on what veterans do for us and what their families do for us. The sacrifices that both those who serve and those who support those who serve is incredibly important. And we have 500,000 Missouri veterans, and one of the great privileges of this job is to get to represent them and the values and commitment to freedom in our country that they stand for. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to welcome a group of Southwest Missouri veterans who came to Washington with the Honor Flight program. I think you do this too, but every time I get a chance, if there's an honor flight from our state, I try to get down there because it is a great time to see and talk to and thank those who have served us. When the honor flight started 20 years ago or so, there were still some World War I veterans coming. And then there were almost all World War II veterans, and today we see a few World War II veterans and some Korea veterans and some Vietnam veterans, all of whom continue to serve in the great tradition of being willing to fight for the freedoms that we enjoy every day. I find it humbling and gratifying to know that those veterans get to come here and enjoy the day with each other, but also in many cases, first time they've ever been to the Capitol. They go to the World War II Memorial and to Arlington and other places on that trip that now so many tens of thousands have taken. Many of those veterans that I saw the other day and that I've seen for the history of the honor flight were just teenagers when they answered the call to serve. Basically, a little more than high school kids who knew that something needed to be done and they were able and willing to do it. They fought difficult battles in some cases, often under unbearable conditions. Some of them lost their closest friends in the military. Many of them lost comrades in arms. Some of them lost comrades who were right beside them. Some of them lost people who went out on another mission and never came back. Some of their families lost the veteran-to-be that never got to be a veteran. I was down just recently, Perryville, Missouri, a little town between Cape Girardeau and St. Louis on the Mississippi River, is building an exact replica, full-size replica of the Vietnam Memorial, the Vietnam Wall. And I was down and we were able to present them with a flag, the group that had raised the money and made the plans at the Vietnam Memorial on the Mall to take back to become part of the Vietnam Memorial at Perryville. Our veterans are an extraordinary group of men and women. They really stand for the best we stand for as a nation. It's important that we just don't honor them on Veterans Day, but honor them every day that we live in this free and prosperous nation that they helped defend. Admittedly, it's hard not to take all the freedoms that we enjoy for granted because generations of Americans have been willing to fight and die to protect those freedoms, and because of that, generations of Americans have benefited from those freedoms, and it seems to us the way people should be able to live everywhere. And maybe too often we think it's even the way people do live everywhere, but in many parts of the world, having the security to walk out the door every morning, to drop your kids off at school, to go to work and earn a living, to worship as you please, to build a better life is not available to people in other countries the way it is here because of the debt of gratitude we owe to our veterans. This year, one of the areas of great legislative success has been in the work for veterans. Chairman Isaacson of Georgia is going to follow me on the floor in just a few minutes, and he's the chairman of that Veterans Committee. And sure, he's got a great committee, but they've got a great chairman. And that committee, its chairman, the committee in the House, have passed 8 bills at least that the President of the United States has signed into law that do a number of things for our veterans. We've built on previous progress for improving veterans' care. A few years ago, we made the decision that veterans need to have more choices. That if you're a veteran, you shouldn't have to drive by the hospital you'd like to go to a hospital miles and hours away. You shouldn't have to drive by 3 facilities that would do as good a job or a better job to get to a veterans facility. Now, there are some things our veterans facilities should be better at than anybody else. They should be better at dealing with post-traumatic stress in all likelihood than anybody else. So they may not be accessible as they should be even then. They should be better at dealing with IED attacks and eye injuries. And since all time, people who worked with veterans, prosthetics, people who've lost arms and legs in the service of their country, they should be pretty good at that. There's no particular reason they should be all that good at open heart surgery or at kidney dialysis or all the other things you go to the hospital for. And if that's where you want to go, if you're a veteran, you should be able to go there. But what we found out is a lot of veterans would rather go closer to home. A lot of veterans would rather go to the hospital they're more familiar with when they need their own health care. They'd like to go to the hospital that they've been to lots of times with other family members and others. And so we've really expanded the Veterans Choice program and expanded the money available for that program. As you're trying to create these opportunities side by side with an existing facility, there's got to be some startup money involved. But eventually, I think our young veterans are going to find that they can almost always find a hospital they'd rather go to or a doctor they'd rather see. We've increased compensation for veterans with service-connected disabilities, and World War II veterans like Arla Harrell from St. Louis, who has suffered a lifetime of illness because he was part of a mustard gas experiment, is finally getting both the compensation and the recognition that his lifetime health was impacted by something that happened while he was serving his country. We've continued efforts to address the problems that the Veterans Administration's had by passing legislation to modernize the outdated benefits claims appeals process to make it easier for VA employees to be fired. You know, while we want to protect employees who point out what's wrong, by the way, there's been plenty of whistles to be blown at the VA over the last decade. And while we want to be sure people can blow those whistles, we also want to be sure that the VA can quickly and effectively move to remove employees who are not doing what they ought to do, and in fact are aggressively doing, in some cases, things they shouldn't be doing. We've worked to expand the possibility and the opportunity for educational benefits by expanding what can happen under the post 9/11 GI Bill and helping connect veterans with employers who provide benefits and programs. The Hire Vets Act, a bill that I sponsored in the Congress, was, I think, the part of the first major piece of legislation that the Congress passed this year. And within 11 months or so, starting when that passed, and I think sometime in the next few weeks, the Department of Labor is going to be talking about how we recognize and evaluate employers who hire veterans, who give veterans credit for skills they learned in the military, who promote veterans. Every employer that wants to say they hire veterans, that's a good thing because you should want to do that. But the Hire Vets Act, sort of like the lead standard for energy, the Hire Vets Act creates a standard that we can recognize companies who do that and do that in a significant way. And I'm certainly pleased the Secretary Acosta at the Department of Labor has really put that on the fast track to get that done so that these companies can begin to be recognized for what they do. Our veterans who have worked hard, do dangerous things, have kept us safe. We owe to them our continued job as legislators, just as we owe to those who follow in their footsteps our continued effort to be sure that people defending our country always have everything they need to defend our country, and that we are grateful to those who defended the country in the past, and I would yield the floor.